Is it your responsibility to keep parliamentarians safe on the Hill? Did you receive any information about the ongoing threat in Ottawa? Isn't that a concern for you? Matthew Green questions security from Parliament. Here's the clip.
With this committee, for the purpose of us having a better understanding of how it evolved from your perspective in writing?
For that, Mr. Chair, I would defer that to the law enforcement partners who would have had that information within.
Was there no, through you, Mr. Chair, internal communications as to the evolving nature of the threat? Would you not have reported to your superiors about how you viewed the threat assessment on the Hill as it evolved?
Those would have been through my own concerns.
Sure.
What I
and
was
would you be
seeing.
willing to present those to this committee for our consideration?
Yes, I'm sure I could go back. I mean, there was nothing in formal writing that was presented here. A lot
No,
of
but
this.
there likely would have been emails and assessments, would there not have been? After it went beyond 3 days, for instance, I'm sure there would have been a concern when you saw Wellington Street, although adjacent to the precinct, having a direct implication on the work of the Hill.
Well, it's important to be clear on this one, Mr. Chair, is that there was never anything that directly implicated the precinct, with the exception of what was happening on Wellington Street.
That's a pretty large exception. Would you have been or received any of the communications that were happening between the National Capital Commission and the City of Ottawa and the Ottawa Police as it related to Wellington Street?
No.
None at all?
No.
So there was no coordinated effort in the early stages or throughout this process that would have included your protective services working in coordination with law enforcement?
No, Mr. Chair, because we're not a law enforcement service, but we're not peace officers, so no.
And so perhaps, Mr. McDonnell, would you have received, in your capacity as Sergeant-at-Arms, any information relating to the ongoing evolving threat that was presented outside the precinct?
No.
No. And in your opinion, is that a concern for you in retrospect? Would it have been better for your service to be able to provide better security and intelligence within the precinct, given what was identified as an unknown threat in terms of cars parked, incendiary devices, or canteens of gasoline walking to and fro? Would, in your opinion, would it be a recommendation that the precinct and the protective services be involved in these types of potential security threats?
Mr. Chair, only if there was a direct link to the precinct.
Would you agree that Wellington Street is a direct link to the precinct?
And not a direct link.
So if MPs, as you've reported, were being harassed and their transportation to and from work, I'll share with you myself, I stayed home. That is a breach, a prima facie breach of my parliamentary privilege to not feel safe on the Hill. So I'll put the question for you, Mr. Chair. Is it your responsibility to keep members of Parliament safe on the Hill?
On the Hill, yes.
So if there are activities surrounding the Hill, let me put this question to you another way. Do you believe that you would have a greater opportunity to keep the Parliament precinct safe if the precinct extended to Wellington Street?
Yes.
Would it be your recommendation that the Hill, in its security recommendations back to Parliament, that the precinct be extended to include the arteries that would perhaps obstruct the coming and going of parliamentarians to and from the Hill?
Yes.
Do you have any other recommendations that you would be willing to share with this committee on safety? Both, I'll start with Mr. McDonnell first, and then Mr. Brookson and Ms. Lacroix, if you'd like to answer. Do you have any other high-level recommendations that you'd like put forward to this committee at this moment?
Other than the Wellington Street, which is under study now, and I'm authorized by the Board of Internal Economy to be part of a working group. And as I said, it's a study in progress, and our final report has yet to be tabled. And there may be some other security recommendations within that report by the time we table it, but I'm not at liberty to speak to it at this time.
Would you agree then, would you prefer that you would have a greater input, at least insight into the nature of the threats that surround the precinct, even if it doesn't include the precinct, given the nature of our work?
Well, Mr. Chair, security, as I said in my opening remarks, is evolving, and we're always proactively addressing it. So yeah, there's always improvements to be made, whether it's inside or outside immediate.
Did you find that not having availability of the information impacted your work?
Well, At times, I knew what was going on in Wellington Street if it was imminent, but it wasn't contained in a report per se. It would be like a phone call. You may want a heads up. Your employees were going to put barriers so your employees.
Unfortunately, I
can come up
have
the
to cut
stairs.
myself off.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Merci.